Hey guys, the Blogging Buddhist here, and today I'm going to talk to you about how to eat and how to manage your meals when you're on a road trip. This can be especially difficult or important if you happen to have diabetes. So I'm going to cover off a couple of things that I tend to do when I'm on road trips. As you guys can see, I'm driving right now. I've got my trusty sidekick Nathan with me. Say hi, Nathan.
Hi.
Alright, so he's my partner in crime here today while we get this filmed. But before we go on, I'm going to get all of you to click on that subscribe or follow button that might be below the video here if you haven't done so already, and check out my main site www.thebloggingbuddhist.com for daily content on pretty much everything I talk about in the videos. So I know that nowadays travel is not something that happens in great amount, mostly because of the pandemic, quarantine issues, self-isolation issues, and things of that sort. Can make it kind of difficult to go on long road trips, but it does still tend to happen. Just recently, actually, my family and I took about a 3.5-hour drive to go deal with some family matters. And sometimes when you travel, especially if you're traveling through the meal hour, it can have a significant impact, especially if you're diabetic. So if you're diabetic, as you know, if you sit still for long hours without moving, it does a couple of different things. For one thing, diabetics don't have the greatest amount of blood circulation in their system. So what that'll cause is, if you're sitting in a car for long periods without moving around or flexing your muscles or getting some kind of increased blood flow there, it can cause some damage. It can make things a little bit painful or uncomfortable, especially if you've started to develop neuropathy. You've already kind of got that loss of sensation in your limbs to start with, so it can cause some issues there. But I mostly want to cover off the meal aspects. Eating on the road can be quite difficult because most of the time, if you're traveling, you're indulging in your trip by eating things that typically, maybe you shouldn't, like fast food or chain restaurants or places that are really high in carbs, high in fats. Yeah, that's Mr. Gord's house. But, places that, if you're already sitting still for a long number of hours, it's going to have an impact on your blood sugar. So do you really want to be introducing high carb foods into your mouth during that transit as well? One good alternative, and sometimes, if you stop at rest stops or gas stations or things of that sort, a lot of these places now will have fresh food options, sandwiches, wraps. Some places even have some salads and those little meat and cheese containers. And you know what, for the most part, if it's just the one meal while you're on the road and then you're back to your routine the next day, that's not such a big deal. You just want to be cognizant of those things, because despite the fact that they look like fresh food, for the most part, they've got a lot of preservatives and stuff in them. They're made so that they'll last as long as possible in the gas station environment or in the rest stop environment or wherever it is that you might be. So you need to be aware of that when you're buying them. The next thing is, you want to try and resist the urge just to grab yourself something like a bag of chips or a candy bar. Again, especially if you have that diabetic aspect to deal with, because heavy foods will make you very lethargic, which, if your road trip happens to be any longer than a few hours, you're going to start to tire out, and the last thing you want to do is get tired and fall asleep at the wheel. Unless you're the passenger and the driver doesn't really care if you sleep or not, then it's not such a big deal. But bottom line is, one of the best options that you can possibly have is to bring your own food. We do this a lot. We have coolers and cooler bags, and especially when we go on long trips, like for example, for Christmas of 2019, my wife and I packed up the car and we actually drove across Canada to go visit my folks in New Brunswick. What we did is we packed a package of Kaiser buns, some ham, cheese slices, pickles, some grape tomatoes, a cucumber, a whole bunch of stuff like that, and we ended up just making our own lunches along the way. Most of the hotels and motels that we stayed at had some form of continental breakfast, so we had the benefit of getting something fresh like toast, muffins. Again, those are all high carbs, so I have to watch myself a little bit more, but for my son and my wife, it's a great option. Breakfast is already included with the room, so that takes care of the first meal. Second meal, we'd have something light and fresh that we'd make ourselves out of the food that we'd bring with us. And then for supper, well, we'd pretty much call it a draw on whatever it is we can get our hands on. So some compromises that have to be made if you're on a significantly long trip. again, like I say, interprovincial travel and stuff isn't exactly happening a great deal right now, but there's still things to consider. If you see that your stomach's growling, you've already had your lunch, you just kind of need that added little something, don't forget it's really important to stay hydrated. So you got to drink lots of water, and a lot of times that growling stomach sensation you get will mostly be because of dehydration. Especially if you're diabetic, your blood sugars are running a little bit high because you're on the road for long hours. You want to make sure that you stay hydrated. Have yourself a sugar-free Powerade, have yourself a liter of water, you know, sip it slowly throughout the whole transit so that you're staying hydrated. So that's it, guys. Make sure to monitor your blood sugars often, and of course, depending on how long your trip is, if your trip is an overnighter, don't forget there's never an excuse not to work out. You can easily do body weight workouts in your hotel room, at your guest's house, wherever it is that you might be staying. Monitor your blood sugars often, stay hydrated, and the healthier you eat, the better you'll feel. So bear that in mind. But while you're busy bearing that in mind, remember also that if you have the occasional hamburger, it ain't going to kill you. Just be mindful of the effects it might have and the number of carbs that might jump into your system while you do. So that's all I got for you guys. I think I said it at the beginning, but in case I didn't, make sure to subscribe and follow. Check out my main site, www.thebloggingbuddhist.com, and I'll see you on the next one. Say bye, Nathan.